Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the October meeting of the Royal Astronomical Society. Are there any people who paid admission to get in here? Any non-members? Any members of the public? We'd like to know that you're welcome, and the meeting actually is free, regardless of what Scott's been implying at the door there. I'd also like to point out that the auditorium video projector has completely failed, so basically there's no meeting, except Chris Darren was smart enough to bring a spare projector. That's the only reason why we've got a meeting. Our meeting tonight is packed. It's packed with observations. We also have Frank and Raymond's excellent conjecture to the solar eclipse in 2009, and several real science talks in the second hour. First, the observation reports. We've got a whole mess of observations. I'd like to ask people to be ready to hop on stage. Please hop up through here. The first observation is by Paul Commission, who likes to speak from the comfort of his chair.
Right. Before I talk about my observation, I want to mention that the challenge object, I'm still working on it. I think I bit more than I can swallow. So it's not ready yet. This is M16, known as NGC 6611. It's in the constellation of Serpens, as many people think it's in Sagittarius, but it's in Serpens. And this particular cluster has more O-type of stars than any known local cluster. You notice there down there are those, that's okay, I don't need this. You notice they're the pillars of creation, those little black marks there. Yeah, right there. Yeah, you're right on it there. That's it. Those are, the Hubble Space Telescope made a very beautiful picture of that. Unfortunately, I don't possess any equipment of that nature, so you'll have to settle for this. So this is a picture I took this summer of M16, a beautiful object, as I said, and easily seen. It's not. It's only about 6th magnitude, so it's you can even see it with Orion. Thank you very much.
Good. Next is Tom Butterworth. Tom.
Where's the clicker?
Or you can just say next slide. It has this wonderful audio interface.
Okay. This is my setup. It's a 5-inch William Optics refractor, and I just bought a new Orion Starshoot Pro camera. And it's I auto-guide it with an Orion auto-guider, and it's got an 80 millimeter Celestron guide scope on top and an EQ6 Pro mount. So next slide. How do we do this? This is my first shot with it. This is a 50-minute exposure with 50 minutes of dark subtracted. This is my first attempt. I'm really pleased. M101, again, 50-minute exposure only. Again, the same amount of dark subtracted. The Western Veil, again, same exposure and same amount of darks. Now here's the same slide that Paul showed just a moment ago. I took it sideways. There's a little cluster down at the lower right-hand side. Again, this is only a 5-inch telescope, and I'm very, very satisfied with the red sensitivity and the amount of nebulosity that the image shows. And here's the Swan Nebula, or the Omega Nebula. I centered a bit too low. I didn't realize there was so much nebulosity at the bottom of the image, so those are my first attempts with this camera and that setup, so I'm very, very pleased. And it's about $6,000 less than the competition, which uses the identical chip.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Okay, those are some recent pictures of Mars. Can anybody guess what I have in this envelope?
Ticket to Mars. Trip to Mars?
So in this envelope, I actually have some pieces of a Mars meteorite. So if anybody wants to see those later, they can see me or Brian McCullough. I'm not sure which one of us will have it. I don't see Brian here yet. But either me or Brian will have this later if you want to take a look at it. Anyway, so this was a couple of pictures of Mars. I guess I showed the one on the left the last meeting, and it's starting to get a little bigger. So I think it was a little over 6 arc seconds in the second picture. And, oh yeah, it's written there. 5.5 and 6.3. They're not quite at the same scale. And you can see the tilt has changed a little bit. We're actually seeing more of the North Pole now than we have in previous apparitions. So what else? I guess that's about it. So one thing that I've noticed is that this is called Sinus Meridiani. And the first time I've been observing Mars, it's split down the middle. And so that's very interesting because the reason this split used to be there like, I don't know, 100 years ago, and I haven't seen it recently until this year. And okay, so this is where the ancient observers defined 0 degrees longitude is along that split. So there's some trivia for you because that was such a prominent thing. Okay.
Thank you, Rolf, and thank you for bringing the meteorites. By the way, did you bring your bodyguard tonight? Next to-
There's another meteorite up front there, so.
Later. Next is Peter Hayman. Peter.
Hello. Well, I've been doing some observing this summer, I guess. Hello. Anyway, a couple of months ago when we went to the observatory at the meeting, I stayed after the long lines of people were gone and tried out my Canon Digital Rebel XSI on it, and seems to have worked kind of nice. On Paul Klauninger's advice, I tried realigning the RGB, and now it doesn't look so polar. You can't see the moons. Next slide. All right. I went to FLO recently and tried out the digital SLR on that. And I was using the continuous shooting mode, so I had a fairly short exposure on, and I just had it keep shooting. And I haven't had much time to process all of the images. This was the first one I got around to actually processing. And, well, I came out of that night with about 10 gigabytes worth of images. So I have a bit of work to do on that. But I think it should turn out kind of nice. Is that it?
Thank you, Peter. So there is, I'm sorry, you forgot about your F-13.
Yeah, I did, eh? Whoops. Right. This was the same night at the observatory. It was my first real shot at the deep sky object. This took up about 2 gigabytes worth. I used the continuous shooting mode again, but for long, like 30-second exposures. And it seems kind of trailed. I'm not sure why. I kind of like it, though. That is the last one.
Thank you, Peter. Here is Paul Klauninger. Paul has a bunch of images tonight, and not all of them are astronomical. A bunch of them are about, well, astronomers released nearby. I'll let Paul explain.
Hi there, everybody. As Peter mentioned, I don't know if some of you, actually quite a few of you came out in the August meeting because we had actually a very nice clear night and Jupiter was on the rise. And that was at the time that the small comet or asteroid had impacted on Jupiter, and we were hoping to try to catch the blemish that it left in Jupiter's atmosphere. Not a great shot. Jupiter was very low above the horizon, so we had a lot of swimming going on there. But did manage, after everybody went through it, did manage to put on a 2U cam onto the scope and record the impact. And I actually did wind up seeing that very briefly in and out before I did the filming there. So it was, for those of you that went out and tried to see it, it really was there. And there's my proof. 2 weeks after that, I had a rather interesting experience. Next slide, please. I went down to the Starfest, annual Starfest gathering down at Mount Forest, and always an interesting place. This year there was a bit of a twist, and pun definitely intended. Sorry, that's what I get for hanging around with Tim Cole, right? Anyway, there's what we had on Thursday, August the 20th, was a tornado passed within 7 kilometers of the Starfest site. You can see marked at the center of the map there. And that was a rather interesting event, to say the least. You can see I've marked the path of the tornado on this map, and the blue ellipses are where on the following day I went and took some of the images I'm about to show you. So next one. This is at the time the storm was going on at the Starfest site. It was very cloudy, very windy, lots of lightning. As I say, we were 7 kilometers away from ground zero, as it were, or line zero. And I know of at least 6 scopes that went down, and a number of tents went down, including, next one, including one of the vendors' tents there as well there. So it was pretty nasty. Okay, well, it's all right. I wanted to show the lightning ones first, but that's all right. The following day, we drove around just to see what we could see, and that tree was about 15 inches in diameter and snapped cleanly. Next one, please. This person's driveway used to be lined with all those tall trees you can see in the distance there, and all the ones in the front, and the tornado is very specific when it moves through. All the ones in the front were just sheared at that level at about 10, 12 feet above the ground, and they were all about that thick. So it just cut right off. You can see the debris on either side of the roadway. Next one, please. Then we went up to Durham. Durham was the place where things were hit the hardest. It was the tornado passed just to the south of the main intersection, and then onto the east side of the town there. And a number of buildings with roofs ripped off. You can see the trees damaged there. Unfortunately, one person did die in this event. A young lad in this area of Durham there was in a conservation area, and apparently a boat dock roof basically got collapsed, and he was underneath that. So unfortunately, he passed away. Next one, please. You can see here the telephone post there, it's still got the transformer on it. Tornadoes are really weird. It sheared off that telephone post, but the wires kept it vertical, so it just kind of slumped down. You can see there, and the fire is burning in the back. This is, as I said, this is the following day, so people were already starting to burn the brush because there were a lot of trees damaged. Next one, please. This one was just south of Durham, and it was a tractor trailer that had flipped over. So I see this, and I think we got off pretty lucky because if that storm had been 7 kilometers to the east. You figure 700 people in that campsite in tents and light trailers with all this wonderful astronomy gear just outside might have been a rather major news story. So I consider myself extremely lucky. Next, please. This is a sequence, just to show you quickly there, sequence of the lightning. I didn't see the funnel cloud, but did see the lightning, and you'll see if you take a reference to the tent there with at the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see that in most of the next images. You'll see how this thing marched from west to north. Next. Very, very energetic lightning, really loud. Next. You can just see it as it's moving. Next. There again. And then the last one I had was to the north. Oops, there was another one. Okay, that's all right, that's all right. So very lucky that we didn't have to be a major news story that evening there. We got off lucky with just a few toppled telescopes. So on a more peaceful note, in a galaxy really not so far away, this is a shot of M33 that I took last week with a 7.5-inch astrograph. The M33, the Triangular Galaxy, is the 3rd largest member of the local group of galaxies after our own Milky Way and Andromeda. And actually, a lot of people believe that M33 may actually be a satellite galaxy to Andromeda going around it. So this was an 18-minute exposure with a 7.5-inch astrograph. So that's all I've got for you. Oh, just one reminder, for those of you that are interested in perhaps doing a digital photography course, the museum is offering their digital photography of the night sky course later this month. It's only 3 sessions on Monday nights, starting the 19th. So call the museum if you're at all interested. We do have a few spots left. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Next, we have a video observation by Eric and Jewel.
Hi everyone. This was my first attempt to film the ISS with my video camera. I've learned that trying to get a good shot with context is very difficult, especially when there's no light in the background. So, is it playing? Okay, go ahead. So, it was last month, about 5 a.m. I wish I had had a little bit more light just so I could show something in the background. So all we see is a little dot coming up on the screen. The ISS, you can find out where when it's coming by Googling ISS sightings Ottawa, and that'll tell you the direction it's coming from, how long it'll pass by for, and a lot of other interesting information. The other thing about the ISS I wanted to mention is NASA just released a report on science done on the ISS for the last 8 years. It's about 2 pages long. No, just kidding. It's actually a good file. The only thing, it doesn't put into context how much it cost to do all that science. But if you want to check it on the nasa.gov site. I'm going to try to get better shots so that we could see buildings and trees in the background so you could see what it's like. But this is my first attempt, and I just thought it was cool to look at it and realize that there's people on there. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Next is Rick Wagner with several unusual images.
Well, we actually had some observing time in September, clear skies, and so I decided to get out and try and do some hydrogen alpha imaging. So what we're using here is a filter that only lets through a very specific color emitted by singly ionized hydrogen. So these are called H2 regions. This is actually the north end of Cygnus. We've got Deneb up at the top and Gamma Cygni here. Deneb's supergiant. Deneb's a supergiant, about 60,000 times the brightness of the sun and about 600 times as big in diameter, so it's actually out to like the orbit of Saturn. North American Nebula you recognize. Down here we've got, this is IC 1318 in this area, the Crescent Nebula, the Propeller Nebula, little guy up there. Let's see, okay, next. Close-up. This is 2 frames, I think, done with a 135 millimeter lens. So again, you can see the North American Nebula, classic shape. This is called the Pelican. You can actually see the beak down here, the eye of the pelican, and then the body here. This little dark worm here is a picture that you'll often see like from Hubble shots and stuff. It's similar to the pillars of creation kind of thing. Next. This is a detail of the IC 1318, sometimes called the Butterfly Nebula. You can see dark body in the middle and then the wings on either side. Gamma Cygni is another giant star. We have a little open cluster right there. These are all taken, the close-up ones are taken with a 1975 vintage Soligor 135 millimeter lens, piece of junk. But you put a hydrogen alpha filter on it, there's no color anymore, right? It's all the light is in one specific color, so there's no chromatic aberration, and it does away with most of the aberrations in the lens and gives you much better quality images. This is, I think, 4 frames put together. Next. Next one. IC 1396, this is up in the south end of Cepheus. Delta Cephei is just up to the right there. This one here is called the Elephant Trunk of Vandenberg Nebula. The little black guys, a number of them are Barnard Dark Nebulae. I'm trying to think now, this was a fairly long exposure. I didn't realize until I was processing these and preparing for the talk that, you know, because I set this up on my mount, it's only 135 millimeter lens, so I just say, you know, take photographs until I come back. So it takes 500-second exposures. And I go away and I watch TV, or I go to bed for a few hours or something, and I come back, and then when you look at it after the fact, you realize, oh, there's 4 hours of exposure in it or something. This guy down here is Mu Cephei, also known as Herschel's garnet star. It's a semi-regular variable, very, very, very red star. Naked eye visibility is about 4.5 magnitude. Next. These are all with the 135 millimeter lens.
Oh, on your camera?
Just on the camera, yeah.
Oh, what?
Sharpless 2-171. This is up on the sort of the eastern side of Cepheus. Just another, each two regions, some nice detail. You can see all the dark nebulosity through here. It was interesting back in the time of Barnard that there was a big debate over what are the dark nebulae. Are they actually nebulae, or are they just empty spots? There's no stars there. But one of the final deciding things was that people sort of began to realize that, well, if you've got a great big field of stars, what's the likelihood that there's going to be an empty spot in a straight line all the way out pointing straight at us? So it just began to not make sense anymore. So they realized that these must be clouds of dust and gas that are between us and the stars or the other nebulosity. In a lot of cases, an object like this is actually forming stars, and so inside some of those dark clouds there will actually be a stellar nursery and stars that are visible in the infrared that are waiting to burst forth. Next. California Nebula, from its shape in southern Perseus. Naked eye star right down here, so you can find the position even if you can't see it. This is actually visible to the naked eye if you use a nebula filter under very, very good skies. And next. Right, this is the last one. This is the longest exposure. This is 4.5 hours. Again, with 135 millimeter lens. This is called the Heart Nebula, with a nice little open cluster in the middle, an NGC nebula at the top, and then just to go with it, I don't know, anyway, they call it the Soul Nebula. So this pair is called the Heart and Soul. And I think that's the last one.
Beautiful images.
This is a Canon, oh no, this is with my S-Big ST2000, so it's a regular CCD camera for astronomy, and then most of them with 135 millimeter lens. The first one of Cygnus was about 6 frames with a 50 millimeter lens.
Thank you, Rick. Beautiful images, so that proves that you don't have to oversaturate the color to get an excellent result. Next observer is Olson. Oh.
Yeah, this is a picture of Jupiter, nice in the sky right now. And every time we look at Jupiter in an eyepiece, we see the moons. And often in photographs, it doesn't show up because people are using webcams, which are 8-bit cameras. They don't have the dynamic range to get the moon and the planet also. But I use a 16-bit astronomical camera, which sucks for taking pictures of planets. But in this wide field view, it showed also the moons, which I thought was kind of interesting. This is M13. We've already seen a picture of that tonight. This one here was a little bit different because I was really tired and went out about midnight and set my scope up, and the seeing was pretty good that night. And so I put it on M33, and I was going to do a bunch of other targets, and then I got tired and I went to bed. And this thing ran for 5 hours with me asleep, and it's probably the best. It's the best image of M33 that I've taken. This is Sharpless 2-112. It's up near Deneb in Cygnus, and It's a hydrogen alpha photo, like some of the other ones you've seen tonight. And it's the first time I've put a hydrogen alpha filter on my camera. And I used it to take the luminosity of the picture. So the detail is hydrogen alpha. Then I took red, green, and blue to make the color image, so it would show up as the color it is. The trouble is when you do that, it's pretty hard not to get this salmon pink. Because it's not a true luminosity photograph. It's actually hydrogen alpha with color added to it. The color is actually Coke can red, probably. That's what it should be. But a ton of detail showing in there. Some of that star in the middle is 30 times as big as our sun, and just blasting stuff around. This was the challenge object from last month, and it's Bernard 142, 143, I think, and together they make up what they call the E nebula. And as was pointed out, this is clouds, and you can see the E shape here of the two nebulas together. A ton of stars in this image. Now, Paul Commission is actually an evil man. So I'm sure you all know already. He had his last month's was Einstein's cross. And when I went out to do this, I had a fairly short focal length, 800 millimeter scope on my mount, and I wasn't about to change it just to get this image. Anyway, this here is Einstein's cross, sort of. So that's in case you missed the pointer. And I want to zoom in now to this spot here. Now, I'm not really zooming in with my telescope. I'm just zooming in by cropping the image. And that's what you see of Einstein's cross. Now, if you take a look, Einstein's cross is actually these little globs in the middle. And I think those globs are 1 arc second across, all 4 of them, and my pixels are like 3 arc seconds. So I don't know what you're really seeing, but I just thought this might be. All right? This was taken on top of a mountain near Tucson by Adam Block with his 20-inch telescope. And now, I'm not sure what, the projector's showing it, but you can see Einstein's cross in there, the 4 little quasar images showing up. And I'll just bounce back and forth here for a second. There's mine. And this is slightly sharper.
Money well spent.
Yeah. I don't know what that scope is worth, but I'm guessing hundreds of thousands. Is that the end? Okay.
Thank you, Bob. Actually, Chris and I got thinking, we were trying to figure out what would Judy, Bob's wife, do to him if he went and bought that 20 RC without her. Well, it's like we didn't have a file photograph of Judy in a strand. All right, we have an observing challenge tonight. It's also, we haven't embarrassed him enough yet tonight. It's going to be presented by Bob.
Okay, first of all, if you take a look at, we're looking to the northeast now, about 10 or 11 o'clock in the evening, and you look up the Milky Way, and you find M52 right here. And what I like to do is, I've lost it here, there's Cassiopeia right there, and if you start with that upper arm, it's about that much further up. So it's pretty easy to find. But this is really high in the sky. I'm guessing that, the straight up is up here somewhere. This is pretty high in the sky, so it's pretty good time to see, good place to see it, and it's up at a reasonable hour. And now I'll just get in a little closer. So now that you can see, this is a 60 power eyepiece. Now this is this is an 82 apparent field of degree eyepiece. It's a Nagler on my scope. And now 50. So here are the challenge objects. 52 if you're just looking, and 52 if you're just looking with an ordinary scope and you want to see it. You should be seeing all the objects anyway, all the messy objects anyway. And then over here is Schernik 43, which is a kind of a small triangular shaped cluster, which is open cluster, which is pretty easy. It's a little bit of nebulosity in it, pretty easy to see. And then up here is something we call the bubble nebula. And it's red, and boy, we see red horrible at night. So it's really pretty tough to spot. And then over here we have right in here we have a planetary nebula, KJPN8. I've never seen it. I've never heard of it, but it was in Starry Night, so I know it exists. And it's pretty small thing to see. And so I'm going to try and image that. I'm going to try and image the whole thing, but I'm going to try and image that planetary to see it. And this is a picture by Dean Jacobson, which shows the same. They're basically on top of each other. It's almost the same view. And down here is 52, and there is Schernik. And this is the bubble nebula. Can you see the beautiful bubble? If you are an imager and haven't imaged the bubble nebula, get off your butt and do it. It's a great object to image. Fabulous target. And then in here somewhere, there's a red pixel. I think that's the planetary nebula. And this is what the planetary nebula looks like. And I don't know what they took this picture with. I have no idea. I could find almost no information on it at all. Two cones. That means something, does it?
Hubble Space Telescope.
Oh, yeah, okay. So this is the Hubble. Your picture may not be quite as good. Anyway, that's it. Good luck.
Thank you very much, Bob. Also, let's consider a 2-hour drive to a dark sky site or a special astronomical site to be a great adventure. Well, Raymond and Frank have us all beat. You know, my snappy intros would be more snappy if you got here a little faster.
No, that's right.
Okay, last summer there was a great eclipse in Asia. Raymond and I decided to take a trip to see it. It was worth doing. So we joined about 963 other eclipse chasers to view the longest solar eclipse until about 2134 on a cruise ship, the Costa Classica. So this was an 11-day cruise organized by Mayu Travel of California. I'm not advertising for them, but they specialize in astronomy trips, mainly eclipse trips and cruises. The eclipse track was going to take it, was going to start in India and then cross over China, including Shanghai, and then run south of Japan into the Pacific and near Iwo Jima. And that would be where the longest duration would occur. And also weather prospects were promising to be best at that point as well. So the cruise was designed to intersect the eclipse path near Iwo Jima. So after a far from ideal bit of weather in the first part of the cruise, we woke up on eclipse day to a nice sunny day and very calm seas. But there were some cumulus clouds in the morning, which gave us some worry. In fact, a couple of drops of rain around 10 in the morning, as I remember. At totality, one of the challenges was that the sun was going to be nearly overhead, 86 degrees high. So that would make photography a bit difficult, aiming cameras and so on. But one of the advantages of the trip was that it was planned so that we had a chance to aim our cameras and set up our equipment for a dry run the day before. The captain put the ship on the same heading at the same time of day as the eclipse would take place, and the ship would be going at the same speed as planned during totality. So this gave us a chance to plan and rehearse a bit for what we were going to do the next day. And it was planned that the ship would run at about 10 knots, as I remember, to keep the stability as great as possible during totality. And the advantage of that also was that it would give us a couple of extra seconds of totality. It was scheduled to be about 6 minutes and 40 seconds. I think we got about 6 minutes and 42. little cheating there.
Oh, sorry, no. Finally, it turned out that we were supposed to have a 6-minute 39.3 seconds. It turned out that we got was 6 minutes 40.3 seconds. We almost got 9/10 of a second more because of the ship's momentum. Hey, it's more than a lot of people, believe me.
We'll take it. Did you want to show some of the slides at this point?
Tell me when to start.
Well, the
Okay,
first
let's
7
start
or
with some of
so.
the slides. This was our cruise ship. All right, on that. So this was Costa Classica. Oh, no. My voice is coach voice. Do you hear me in the back? Okay, no. So this is a Costa Classica, our cruise ship that we use. Next slide. This is when, to get to the ship the first day, everything had to be scanned. So it was one big bottleneck after another for the first day. So as you can see, one scan machine, and this is just maybe 1% of the people coming in. Next slide. So that was the itinerary that we had. First we leave Tianjin in China. We first do a stop in Shenzhou. Then we go down to Kagoshima. Then the next point of call was the go around Iwo Jima and see the maximum eclipse to be there. And then our next was we're going to stop Kobe, come back. On the way here, I didn't have a photograph, but we did pass beside the Japan launch center, but it was so hazy, it was difficult to see it properly with the eye. Then from here, we just went back and returned to Tianjin. 11 days. Next slide. This is a better map showing what we've done. This is exactly what GPS is. What I'd like to bring to your attention is that right here at the bottom is what we went around Iwo Jima. And then this is the area what we went through. So it's looks a bit like this. Next slide. So here's a large section of what we did. And over here, so we first saw the first contact over here. We tracked this way. Then the ship turned around. We hit second contact here. We hit third contact here. We thought this was be the maximum, but when we did, some guys did recalculation found this was here, but didn't care. This was right here was great enough for us. We found out later that there was 2 other ships here from Japan, cruise ships that came around, and they were side beside us. So then once we had done that, the ship turned around, and the 4th contact was way up in that corner, up on top. Next slide. So here's more detail. So at the bottom is first contact. Here's was the second contact, or third contact. This is what we thought to be the longest eclipse, but it turned out this is where it was after more rigorous calculations. Ship turned around, and the 4th contact was up there. And these were 2 other ships that were there. So we're only 3 ships in that general area. One of the best places to view it. Next slide. Okay, Frank, it's your turn.
Okay. So I had seen 3 total eclipses before in my life, but I had never tried any photography, but this one seemed long enough that I would be able to attempt something. So I had purchased a digital camera, my first one, a month before, and was madly reading the manual and trying to figure out what automatic settings to use. For some reason, camera manuals don't seem to include instructions for total solar eclipses. I don't know why, but I was certainly reading madly up to the day before the eclipse, trying to determine what would be best. So early on the eclipse morning, people set up their equipment on deck, and Raymond and I happened to set up right next to one another. I guess great minds think alike. I was using a borrowed tripod, and I set up on a ledge of the pool on the deck and amidships where the stability would be best. Did you want to show some of the
Yep.
deck
Next slide,
shots?
please. So here's Frank with his setup. We put a towel because we were so much near the equator. We're so much near the equator is that you'll see there's towels with a lot of the equipment to keep it cool. So here's Frank with the corner of the pool trying to set up, and as you can see, he's crouching down to go as high as we can to see it. Next slide. This is my setup. The camera, a block, the mirror, because it said mine was horizontal, and I was using direct height through the lens, and a towel to put it through. Next slide. I had the privilege to meet Dr. Edmund Bechstein, Department of Head of Physics at MIT. He went and took a look, and he said it was pretty good setup. It was pretty interesting. I was so happy. Look at me smiling. The head of MIT and coming over and seeing, hey, I want to see this. Next slide. And so this is what the ship around, all the people had their setup, all the going through. Next slide. The MIT area that were the people on top. We were at the bottom. Next slide. And as you can see, some of the cumulus, some of the height, and this is near the behind the pool. So that was the general view that people had in the sky above. Next slide. Go, Frank.
Okay. So Raymond had been taking photographs of the partial phase while I looked at it through 15 by 70 binoculars with a solar filter. It was perfectly clear overhead. The day it turned out really well, and the sea was as calm as a lake. So when totality approaches, the problem is there's just too much happening all at once. Too much to look at is the problem. You want to see the approaching shadow. You want to look for Bailey's beads, shadow bands, then the diamond ring, the prominences that may be visible, and then, of course, the corona and the all-around sunset effect and stars and planets that become visible in the sky. Actually, Venus had appeared well before second contact, maybe 20 minutes before second contact. And as soon as totality approached, Mercury was obvious and was very red. As my notes say, as totality approached, watched the shadow come from behind the ship, and clouds on the horizon turned gray and dark. Finally, a beautiful diamond ring and totality. Removed filters from binos and viewed the corona, largely circular and featureless, except for feather-like streamers at the sun's poles. So no prominences or Bailey's beads. Horizon especially beautiful with puffy cumulus in sunset colors. Sky not extremely dark. This was a matter of some discussion on the ship. A lot of people thought this would be an especially dark eclipse because of the length of the totality and hence the size of the shadow cone. But the consensus was that it was not particularly dark. And again, there are all sorts of opinions as to why that was the case. So during totality, I was wishing I had a second camera to take shots of the horizon and the colors as the colors changed on the clouds. Since the camera was doing its thing automatically, I spent totality watching the eclipse in the binoculars with the filters removed now, and looking at it naked eye as well. Then after what seemed like no more than about 3 minutes, I'd say, we reached the end of totality, and there was another even longer diamond ring. So in the end, I found I had taken 5.5 minutes of totality, ending with the second diamond ring. Could we show the video now, Chris?
So here's what he was talking about. Here's Venus, and here's Mercury, and this is what you would see the horizon. So here's a photograph of what he was talking about, the totality and how much bright it is below near the horizon. And you can see from the people that it wasn't really that dark when we were on the water. There was a lot of light reflecting off the water and everywhere. So pretty neat is that this was one person that was on the cruise ship that took up this photograph. Next. Next. Sound, please.
We may not get much sound without the projector.
Okay.
Try it now.
So this is an edited video, about 2 minutes of the 5.5 minutes I took. So he was just announcing that was the cruise director announcing from the bridge that it was mid-totality. And you can see this is not great resolution, but you can see some of the detail on the corona. There's a bit of an extension about the 7 o'clock position.
So now we're doing the last bit of the video. So this will be getting up to third contact now. The reason of the moving is because of the shift, the sea and everything else. That we couldn't control. It's just the way that things were with having the ship. Things would move around.
But I think it's obvious how calm it was because this is a 12-time zoom, and I didn't have to adjust the the camera during that entire 5.5 minutes. So what you're seeing is 12 times exaggerated the ship's roll. What the sun is doing there going in and out, I have no idea. Maybe someone could explain that to me. Yeah.
Oh, so
Here
this
comes the
now
diamond
people
ring.
are saying that we're getting close to there it is. Third contact, then the diamond ring.
And that's when I had to end the camera exposure. I tried to take some photos of the partial phase later, but they didn't turn out very well, so I'll let Raymond show his much better results of that. Just a few notes on the camera. It was a simple Lumix digital ZS1, 10.2 megapixels, and as I said, a 25 millimeter lens, and as I said, I used a 12 times zoom. So I think it shows what results you can get with a fairly simple, inexpensive camera and with a very inexperienced photographer. Okay, Raymond?
Next slide. Okay, so here's second contact with a bit of prominence going around. Next. Here's another shot getting more into it. Next. Now we're getting is more of the corona going around. Next. Next, please. Can you see some of a bit showing a bit of the filaments coming through? I still have to these are raw photos. They have not been processed. I still have to go through Photoshop and use this kind of telescope technique that he talked about during the summer to make it even better. I haven't even touched that yet. I wish I will in time. Next one, please. Now I'm starting to do is more and trying to get the earth shine. Next one, please. Next one. And there's the earth shine. So right now is that I'm for the reflection of the earth's light on the moon. Next one, please. And that is starting to get to third contact. Next. There's the diamond ring. Next one. Slightly bigger. Next, please. And that's a composite of mostly of the coronas put together with Photoshop, showing the earthshine moon and the various stages of the corona. You can see here some of the filaments sticking out. I was quite surprised that I haven't really done a lot of the processing. That's just raw photos. Just raw photos going through there. Next slide. And that's the equipment I used. So for the techies, here goes. It's a Nikon D300 with an extra battery pack because of the time. Up on top is GPS to know where I was. An emergency manual shutter release because I had put up a USB off software to run it. A 400 millimeter f3.5 telephoto lens. This bracket, I am grateful for Ken Whitnall for making it for me to fit. This is a first surface mirror. Right now it's on the reverse side. Mirror at 45 degrees because when I added that, it only came down to 5 degrees and negative 5 degrees. So it was very flat, very stable. A video head and a carbon tripod. So that's the equipment I use to take the photographs. What I don't show is the shield because of the reflection off the mirror to the camera, not to blind my eyes. Next, please. Go, Frank.
Okay, so after the cruise, I returned home. I'd spent 3 days in Beijing at the beginning of the cruise. But Raymond continued his trip to China for about 3 weeks, and he has some photos to show.
Next one. So, as himself, I was really happy with my trip. By the way, this is Tibetan monks, the expressions that they do when they're doing the arguments. If you're going to a point, you have to make it show. So that was one of the Tibetan monks showing the process of doing the stages for it. And this is the Gugu slide. Okay, this is the Gaga slide. Okay, next slide. Say no more. Isn't he cute? Who? Me. I just love that photo. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
very much. We have time for perhaps 2 questions.
As anyone has questions, specific questions of the trip or things about the eclipse or solar eclipse? Yes?
Not so much about the eclipse, but about this slide. What's with the gloves? Is this?
Oh, this is that I was in Chengdu visiting the panda breeding center in Chengdu. And what it is for a nice hefty contribution, donation, is that you're permitted to be photographed with a young panda. Not exactly baby, but not exactly a baby, but a very young panda. Kind of a fundraiser, but expensive. I didn't care. In Chinese, 1,000 yuan, approximately $160. Right? But hey, why the gloves? Oh, the gloves is because it's not to give them any germs or danger. Like you have to put the smock, you have to put the gloves, and they put a towel on you, and to protect the panda from any cross germs or whatever that could be transmitted. And what happened is that the panda here, he just was eating, that's a piece of apple. For him, it's candy. At one point, he had finished his apple and he just sat there, just not doing anything. While the others, what's their name, is the caretakers, were chit-chatting with each other, not seeing it. The one person turned their head, sees the panda just sitting there like just numb. Oh, and the girl went, oh. She pulled out an apple, give it to him. The cub took the apple, looked at it, and just kept on eating it, just like it was like giving kids candy. It was so funny. It was so funny. But I know holding that panda was so great. One thing I noticed is hardly any teeth. We'll look at the claws.
Any other questions?
We can always harangue Raymond and Frank after the meeting with cookies and caffeine to give you the details about this trip and the current feeding of pandas. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
We're slightly early this evening, so I'd like to continue with Pierre Martin's presentation of what you can observe in the skies this month.
Thanks, Attila. Okay, so I don't know about you, but I find that October is a great month of the year to do observing. It's one of those months that the temperature is much cooler. It's cooling down, but it's still not frigidly cold. So it's actually nice and comfortable to observe. No more humidity, no more bugs. But my favorite part is actually that because of the longer nights, of course, we get to see a lot of variety in the skies, starting with a lot of the summer sky at first, early in the evening, followed by the typical fall sky that we see mid-evening, and then followed late at night by the winter constellations rising. Actually, I should say by mid-month, the winter sky is going to be just about all the way up by dawn or close to it. So it just makes it great to observe all kinds of objects, and especially before the snow starts to fly, and then it becomes more of a hassle to set up equipment. It's a great occasion to set up on firm ground still and have some good observing time. So on this first slide, we see the October sky approximately at mid-month and facing the southwest. So we're actually looking at a lot of the summer constellations right now, a lot of the recognizable stuff. And from the dark sky site, it's also a great occasion to see a good chunk of the summer Milky Way all the way down to Sagittarius, which is actually just setting by about 8 o'clock in the evening. The Milky Way happens to stretch almost completely vertical, going all the way down to the southwest. And the summer triangle, we're just missing the star Deneb up here, but it's still very high up. So that just makes it a great occasion to check out a lot of the popular deep sky objects, which I'm just going to quickly zoom in approximately those areas of the sky. To locate these gems, your go-to scope will do a good job finding them, or even better is a star map and just a good general knowledge of where things are. So a great opportunity to see some of these cool objects. We can still see very well. Okay, so now we're moving our field of view same time, but just shifted a little bit more to the southeast. And we see our Milky Way towards the right, and Sagittarius just starting to set. So that's actually a very short window to see Sagittarius with all these great objects in that direction facing the center of the galaxy. But in the south-southeast, what dominates that part of the sky is Aquarius and Capricornus. And naturally in Capricornus, what really stands out is Jupiter, which you really cannot miss, shining at magnitude minus 2.5 or so. So for Jupiter, a pair of binoculars held steady will definitely show you the 4 largest moons. And a small telescope will reveal the cloud belts of Jupiter. And under good seeing and higher magnification, you can start to see some good details, some swirls and blue festoons and small ovals. And when the Great Red Spot is visible, you can see that pretty well, even with a small instrument under, provided the seeing is decent enough to see it. Because Jupiter, although it's at its best at about 8 o'clock in the evening, just about the highest area in the sky over the south, it's still not very high. So any kind of turbulence or atmospheric seeing will degrade it quite a bit. So it's quite a difference compared to seeing the planets in the wintertime when they lie almost directly overhead on the ecliptic. So now just quickly looking at there's some really cool deep sky objects we can see. M15 is one of my favorite globular clusters, right next after M13. And a lot of objects, some of those that are typically overlooked. Some of those are pretty faint, but they are all quite accessible. M31, the Great Andromeda Galaxy, is visible very, very high up above the east, almost straight overhead. So you cannot miss that. That's a great time of the year to check out our closest spiral galaxy. As well as we spoke, and we saw some great images a bit earlier of the Pinwheel Galaxy, M33. So another interesting object, but much fainter than the Andromeda Galaxy. Okay, now we're going to move in to midnight, and we're going to move our field of view a bit to the east. So what we see in that area of the sky is of course, a lot of the winter constellations starting to rise. Taurus is completely up, as well as Riga and Perseus. And Orion is just starting to clear the trees, just starting to come up. So already by midnight, the Orion the Hunter is rising. And as I mentioned earlier, the Orion and all the winter sky will be completely up in the south, very high up by dawn, or even about a couple hours until dawn. And that's just in a couple of weeks from now. So the sky is really changing quickly. So just looking at some of those great objects, we see a lot of beautiful star clusters we see in the winter sky. And just as a side note, I was out doing some meteor observing recently at a dark sky site. And at some point in the night, I took a break and I decided, you know what, I'm just going to pull out my 9x63 binoculars from my observing bag and just do a few minutes of to see what I can see with the binoculars. Well, I had such a great time just with the binoculars down on my lawn chair that I ended up a good hour just looking at some of these things, the double cluster M45, Andromeda, and they were just beautiful, very high up in the dark area of the sky. So it just goes to show that sometimes it's great just to lie back, even with all our equipment, our fancy telescopes. Sometimes the best view can be had with a simple pair of binoculars, just lying down and looking up. So of course M42 is still very low at midnight, but by 4 a.m. it's very easy to see. So a great opportunity to see some of those great winter objects in the morning sky, provided you're an early morning person, which is my problem. Okay, so now we're going to look at some of the neat things to look forward to this month. There's going to be an array of planetary alignments and groupings starting next weekend for a period of a few days. So I would definitely suggest you mark that up on your calendar. This is one of the neat things. The planets are going to be moving fairly quickly against each other. So the first one on October 8th, we see Saturn, Mercury, and Venus. Saturn and Mercury are going to be very close together. Actually, just about half a degree or so apart. So this is definitely a nice conjunction in the morning sky. You will need a good horizon to see this. It's fairly low, and the sky, as you see, is already getting bright by 6:15 a.m. But if you have a clear eastern horizon, do take note of this. Moving to the next one, on the morning of October 9, I know there's been a lot of talk about the NASA's L-Cross lunar orbiter that's going to smack into the moon's south pole. And what's the cool thing about this is there's possibility that it is going to kick up a plume and a cloud of dust that might even be visible in amateur telescopes, provided you know exactly where to look. Fortunately, that will not be visible for Ottawa, only because it's going to be 7:30 a.m. for our time, which the sky is going to be completely daylight. So this is one of those events will only be seen for the west coast. Now we move on to the following morning, October 10. We're back to our planets in the morning sky. And we see Venus, Saturn, and Mercury producing a nice line. So quite different than the alignment we saw on the morning of the 8th. And we move to October 13th, so a few mornings later. And we see the moon just starting to enter the scene on the top here. Just a few days past the last quarter, so it's winding on its way to new moon on October 18, I believe. And what's actually really cool to look at, just check out how close Saturn and Venus are. If I'm not mistaken, it's only a quarter of a degree split, so very close. And Mercury is starting to sink, it's already descend from its highest point. So this could be a nice photo opportunity there. And now we're looking at October 15. Again, our planets have changed. Actually, this is here where we have a nice sort of lineup of the moon and Saturn and Mercury. Mercury being even lower, so again, I'll stress a good horizon is going to be necessary. But this could be a cool opportunity for those of you with a telephoto lens where you can frame this scene nicely with maybe some nice foreground scenery. That could be really interesting. And lastly, our last planet, interesting planet grouping is on the 16th, about 6:30 in the morning. And the moon just happens to be just south of our planets here, and very, very thin, just a slight sliver, which could be, provided you have a good view in that area, could be an excellent opportunity to take photos or even to check out. Now, just to give you an idea just how low this is only approximately a binocular field from the horizon. So not very high at all. And the window is also very short. Only half an hour after this, the sun is going to be close to rising. I think the sun rises mid-month at about 7:15 or so. So it's actually a short window before the sky actually gets too bright. Okay, now, as I mentioned, the new moon happening on October 18. This means that it's going to be a good opportunity to check out the zodiacal light, which is going to be visible in every clear morning of the second half of the month of October. The zodiacal light, a lot of people see it mistakenly thinking that it's light pollution or there's a haze of some kind happening there. What it is, it's actually a completely natural phenomena. It's the glow caused by sunlight reflecting off countless dust particles in the solar system. And this creates this glow that stretches all along the ecliptic, along the plane of the solar system. And it just happens that this glow is brightest in the direction towards the sun. So this means that the best time to see the zodiacal light is the hour or two after sunset during the springtime, or during the fall in the hour or two in the morning hours right before dawn. And why spring and fall? Well, because the ecliptic either in the spring or fall happens to stretch almost vertical. So while the summer, it would be very low, it would stretch almost at a shallow angle against the horizon, so you wouldn't see it. It would just be lost in the haze and the light pollution and all that. Now, seeing it stretch all the way up makes it very, very easy to see. And this is big. Like this is, you're looking at a cone of light that's very diffuse, but stretches almost halfway up or more if you have exceptionally dark skies. So the best time, like I mentioned, an hour or two before the sun comes up. So a lot of things happen in the morning skies this month. So this is one of them, but it does require dark skies. So getting away from the sources of light pollution makes a big difference. Okay, so the last significant event, of course, last but certainly not least, is the Orionid meteor shower, which peaks on the morning of October 21st. This is one of the two Comet Halley showers that we see, the other one being the Eta Aquarius, visible in May. So we actually pass twice during the year in Halley's comet's a stream of dust particles. So the Orionids they're not considered to be the most active shower of the year. That claim would go to the Perseids and the Geminids. But it's still a nice shower. It's a pretty decent shower that produces typically in most years about 20 meters per hour, and they are typically faint, so dark skies help. However, what's actually kind of unusual is the past 2 years have been anything but normal for the Orionids. The Orionids have surged with rates about 3 times higher than the norm, and also were accompanied by many fireballs. So there was definitely something unusual happening since 2006. The past 3 years were very active. And we believe that we simply encountered an area of the dust stream that had a concentrated cloud of larger particles, creating that stronger shower than usual. So what does this mean for this year? We're not entirely sure if those fireballs are going to happen again. It's anybody's guess right now. However, based on history, there's a good possibility, I should say, even that there could be enhanced rates. So maybe at least until up to 30 meters per hour, which would still be a pretty decent show under dark skies. So the Orionid radiant is located on that morning. As you can see, the whole winter sky is well up over the horizon. And the radiant is pretty much on the border of Orion and Gemini, which is right up here. So it lies very high up. It's actually one of my favorite showers, even though it's not the strongest one. It's still very pretty for activity. And in the past couple of years, I've been very lucky taking images, capturing a lot of meteors. As you notice, the meteors can occur and will occur in any parts of the sky. So it's best to choose a area of the sky where you look away from any sources of light pollution, and you also prevent any significant obstructions like trees and houses and all that. So getting away from the lights makes a big difference, especially to catch more of the fainter meteors. And lastly, just get yourself comfortable. Just make sure you set up, you don't get yourself cold. You get a good lawn chair, good sleeping bag. And if you get cold, you're not going to want to observe this very long. But if you're comfortable and you're patient, that's where you get rewarded with good activity. And the last one is just a quick summary. So if the main night of October 21st is clouded out, there is some pretty decent activity active from the 20th to the 22nd. So it's actually, the Orionids tend to have a plateau of activity for a couple nights. So even if you're clouded out on the 21st, it's still worthwhile going either a night early or a night or two after the normal peak. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pierre.
Thanks, Attila. I'm going to talk about, as Attila said, outreach events past and stuff coming up in the future. So a little bit about the CARP event that we had a couple of weeks ago. You may remember that when Linda Meyer and myself were up here in the September meeting, we were going to talk. We were telling you about what to expect and so forth. This was a double header event. We in that we had a daytime solar observing as well as an evening star party. The daytime event also included a nice exhibit as well as a book sale, astronomy book sale, a really big astronomy book sale, in fact. And as well, we had, Rolf will be showing us an exhibit that he brought, as well as we started off with expecting to have solar observing, and then that turned into Attila noticed the moon. And then Rolf came along, and Rolf Meyer came along, and he managed to find Venus without any means other than just knowing where it is, knowing where to look. So that turned it into a daytime planet event as well. The evening event, as I'll show you, had a really terrific turnout of volunteers, and what was nice as well was that some of the people that came for the daytime event, the public, also showed up in the evening and brought friends as well. So that was nice to see. We're seeing more of that, by the way. We're seeing people coming back, attending events for a long period of time, and then coming back, and so forth. So what I wanted to show you on this slide here is in the top left one here. We have a pretty nice booth, that an exhibit that we put some astro photos and so forth on there, and I try to use that as much as I can, and it does get a lot of attention here. Other things to note here is that I was really sort of touched by our members, sort of how they accommodate people with special needs, and it really worked out quite well. This little fellow in the bottom left corner is I work with his father, and he's I think he's 5 years old, and he's just absolutely enamored with astronomy. So he was quite taken by that and so forth. I don't know if it was expected, but there was a photographer from one of the local newspapers that, Linda, do you remember the name of that newspaper?
It's the West Carleton Review.
West Carleton Review, thanks. Who showed up, and he took a nice picture of a Pierre there, and I just sort of blew up the caption there. But what he also did as well, which was quite impressive, he stuck his camera through. Was this Ken Whitnell's? I wasn't there when it happened. Was this Ken Whitnell's scope? And he actually got a pretty impressive image, considering that he just went like that up. Okay. Nice shot of there, Pierre. You know, I like to always share the feedback we receive from people here, so I'll give you 30 seconds to read this here. But this lady here is she's I've been exchanging emails with her. She's always sort of saying, "When's your next event? When's your next event?" Very enthusiastic. I guess Chris, she spent some time with you, and judging from her response here, she was quite taken by what you had showed. So nice going, Chris. Very enthusiastic people. So that you can see that we really do connect with people who don't have the equipment we have, or maybe the knowledge, but they certainly they enjoy it as much as we do. Thanks, Chris. So what I wanted to show you here is we had a terrific turnout. We had some people from daytime and some people from the daytime solar observing. Some of our members that also showed up in the nighttime. Thank you very much. It was a long day. I know that. It was it was a surprisingly a warm day as well. But this was it says something about the enthusiasm of our members. Clearly it's growing here. Now I want to stop here for a second because I've missed something twice before, and I wanted to stop and make sure I emphasized it. Jimmy Book. I hope you're here because I want to emphasize it. Thanks. He's a participator and a terrific supporter in previous events, and I've missed him twice before. So I really wanted to thank him again because he's always fun, he's always enthusiastic, and always willing. Okay, so you'll notice there's an increasing number of people, and we have a lot of fun for these events. So, Chris. So what about the future? What's happening? Well, the next round of events at CARP it's just going to be an evening star party is planned for next Friday. So this is once again it's at the CARP library adjacent to the famous Diefenbunker. And if you go onto our Ottawa RASC website, you'll you'll see more details in terms of a map and so forth. We got a couple of rain dates just in case on the following that Saturday after that, and then a week later. This is next weekend that is planned, so I know that's the long weekend. So I'm hopefully not everyone have left town and gone to their cottages, but I'm looking forward to it for all the reasons that Pierre said. Longer night, mosquitoes gone and so forth. The last event that we had, it was the skies were sort of tentative, we're thinking it's not going to happen, it will happen, it's not going to happen. So the good thing is to check out the emails that I'll be sending out, and at the same time, the best thing to do is check out the website. Okay, the website where I'll announce the go, no go. Okay. So another event that's I'm really excited about, and I think I talked about this a little briefly here, is we were approached by the NRC to participate in a what they call the Science Fun Fest. This is an annual event that they held in the Booth Street complex, and they sent us an email and said, "Would you folks be interested in participating in this hands-on interactive event?" And when they started to describe it to me, first of all, I thought we're a terrific fit for this. All right, there's a lot of other exhibitors. It's a family event, and they're doing everything. They got all the logistics, sorted out for us. They're promoting it big time. They're asking me left and right, what would you like? We'll give you free internet access, high-speed internet access, and so forth. So I'm planning the whole story here. And a full exhibit. If it's sunny, I'd like to do solar observing. The whole thing that we normally have. To be honest, one of the things I wanted to talk to Gary Boyle about was. With the astrocasting that he used to do, he had suggested an idea of actually bringing in images from an observatory on the other side of the planet. So I was thinking through the internet, we could maybe have some live images from an observatory on the other side of the planet. That would be pretty cool. This is during the daytime, so it's not an evening event. I'm going to be posting this weekend more details on this on the website, but if anyone's interested, please let me know. I'll be sending out notes, but I'd really like to have a good support for this, because I forgot to mention the most important thing. Last year they had 3,000 people showed up at the event, so this is going to be a big event. So, all right, and the other thing as well is that our exhibit will be right beside our booth will be right beside the booth of the CSA, the Canadian Space Agency. So I'm pretty excited about that as well. Okay. I think that's it. Oh, over to you, Rolf.
So this is something I whipped up for the carp exhibit at the Diefenbunker. And so Linda thought it would be cool if we had a meteorite on display there, but the problem with that is that, they're kind of small and they kind of wander away. So I thought I would attach it to something big and ugly that somebody would be embarrassed about walking away with. So there's a picture of it, and I brought it in today, and it's up there at the front. So I took a meteorite and stuck it in the drill press and drilled a hole in it and put a cable through it. And then I found a piece of wood, which is actually like a drawer front, and it's got this very convenient handle for carrying it. And I found some legs that came from a chair or something, and I put those on it so that you could set it on a table, or right now it's just sitting on the floor there. And then from Wikipedia, I got actually just a brief description of this particular meteorite, which is a Campo de Cielo, which fell in Argentina many years ago. And it's actually I think the largest known weight of meteorites, some 60 tons or something. So pieces of this are actually pretty cheap, so you can get pieces of that on the internet. So do come up and by all means handle the meteorite. And the more people that handle it, basically the better, because it does have a little bit of rust on it, and that kind of rubs it off and cleans it up a bit. So take a look at it after the meeting.
Thank you very much, Rolf. Mr. Taylor to talk about his experience at the Perimeter Institute in Waterloo, Ontario.
Good evening. Now, this is some more outreach work, but in the opposite direction. Some people are reaching out to you and would like to invite you to another festival. The Perimeter Institute is in Waterloo, Ontario, and they're celebrating their 10th anniversary this year. So they're holding a big festival coming up the 15th to the 25th of October called the Quantum to Cosmos Festival. So I'd just like to tell you a little bit about what's coming up and my connection with it. You probably heard some things in the news recently about one of the founders of RIM, the CEO of RIM, spending a lot of his money fighting legal battles over a hockey team. Well, the other one, the other CEO of RIM, Mike Lazaridis, spent his money on something a little bit more beneficial, the Perimeter Institute of Theoretical Physics. So he's actually donated quite a lot of money to setting up a Canadian think tank in theoretical physics. And it is making quite a name for itself amongst the physics community. Attila mentioned that they recently managed to invite Stephen Hawking to be a guest at their institute. He's been a little bit ill recently, so he's only been participating video-wise, but they have quite a large slate of other physicists lined up, and there's some really interesting work going on there. Next slide, please. How I spent my summer vacation was visiting the Perimeter Institute as a physics teacher. This is another one of their outreach activities. They invite high school physics teachers, not just from Canada, but this time from all over the world, to come together and talk and think about teaching physics for a week. It was a fabulous experience, and the Perimeter Institute pays for this. So it's not out of our own pocket. We can travel and meet each other from all over the world, as I say, and share ideas on how can we really get across to people the interesting stuff that's happening in physics. I have this problem as being a physics teacher. What I have to tell my students about most of the time is antique stuff, you know, Newton. Still, it's useful, but the really exciting stuff has been happening in the last 100 years. And there's very little covered in the high school curriculum, mainly because it's hard. It's tricky, but it's really amazing and fascinating stuff. So the Perimeter Institute is trying to find ways of getting that interesting stuff out to the high schools and out to the public. Next slide, please. This is what they actually do. They have physicists come in and talk physics. And what do you need to talk physics? You don't need a whole bunch of fancy stuff. You need coffee, and you need a blackboard, and a comfortable place to sit around and talk. So that's what's inside the Perimeter Institute. It's a lovely building full of well-lit offices, beautiful views over the Waterloo countryside, and blackboards, coffee, and sofas. And that's where physics happens. So it was really quite amazing to see this, and we got a chance to have lunch with some of the physicists on a couple of occasions and really ask them the questions that were puzzling us about, well, how does this quantum stuff really work? And what good is it anyway? And when are we going to actually see something come out of the string theory ideas? And they had some answers, some very interesting stuff too. So they want to tell the public. Next slide, please. So they're holding a celebration. Quantum to Cosmos. The whole range, from the very, very tiniest 10 to the minus 43, all the way up to the most enormous, the entire universe, or maybe there's multiverses. So they want to tell the public about this. They want to get a connection between these theoretical physicists and the real world. So they're going to be doing it in all kinds of different ways. They have exhibits. They have one of the Mars rover simulators there. They have a movie film festival, which is both a combination of documentaries and science fiction. They have music festivals, they have TV programs, they have cartoons that they've been making about kids learning quantum mechanics, and they're putting it all together and inviting the public to come and share. Now, I realize that Waterloo is maybe a little bit far for us to get to, but the joy of the internet is that it can be shared worldwide immediately, and that's what they're doing also. Next, please. Here's a list of some of the lectures, just a small sampling. There's about 10 times as many as this. These are the ones I picked out about the cosmos. So we have the planet Earth, a billion people, what are we going to do with it? The origin of the universe, how time began. What's going to happen in the future? The guy who does the X prizes, the guy who's trying to encourage new ways of getting into space, he's going to be talking the best way of predicting the future is to invent it yourself. Make it happen. The state of the universes, maybe there's more than one. Life, are we here because of the way the universe is? If the universe wasn't here, then we wouldn't be here to observe it. And then there's going to be some discussions, panel discussions, that will be also broadcast, next slide, on TVO. TVO is also a major sponsor of this event, and one particular program, The Agenda with Steve Peikin, is going to be broadcasting several times from the Quantum to Cosmos Festival and trying to get some more public discussion going about the use of science and how it affects our lives and how it affects the future of our planet. So really trying to see the practical applications and the real social impact of some of these new ideas that are coming out of theoretical physics. So it promises to be a really great event. I think a lot of you people will be quite interested in it. If you can get to Waterloo, it's a great trip. I recommend it. If you can't get to Waterloo, you can certainly get to the internet. Next slide. Right there. q2cfestival.com is where it's all going to be happening. So starting on the 15th of October, the website's already up, so you can go and have a preview of what's coming. And starting on the 15th, the lectures will be streamed on the website. They'll be also stored, so if you don't catch them on the days, you can go back and find them in another day. And there's links there also to the Perimeter Institute and what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And I find that they're a really amazing way of selling what I think is my life, physics, to a much larger group of people. And they're being very successful at this. They hold public lectures in the past, and they've been selling to sold-out crowds in a high school auditorium. So they're really making a connection with the public, and I think this is something that we also can see how they're doing it and learn from what they're doing too. There's brochures up at the front if you'd like to get pick one of these up. They're free, and hope you get online. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. And thank you also for the door card. Continuing our theme of big physics and big astronomy, please welcome Richard Alexandrowich. Talk about Orion, or other part of Orion.
Good evening, everyone. Well, Rick was alluding to objects in the in the universe, in the galaxy, namely big stars, giants, supergiants, and that's what I'll be talking about this evening. This one is visible in every corner of the globe except in the Antarctic. If you happen to live there, well, you're out of luck. It's on the top 10 list of popular stars, and it's that scintillating point of light that we're all familiar with, rising in the east, and it will soon. Actually, 3-4 in the morning, you could see it rising there in Orion. It's a bit of a fifth wheel because all the rest of the stars are blue, and this one shines with an orangey light. Latest research has it that it's one of the largest of all visible stars in the sky, and Antares comes in second. It's a well-documented star. It is a classic specimen in stellar evolution, and also an intriguing one at that. Next, please. According to 2008 parallax measurements at 640 light years distant, close by cosmic standards, Betelgeuse is actually nearing the end of its relatively short life. An unstable battle between outward thermal energy and gravitational collapse has already begun. Next, please. So what you see there is the forces of outward thermal energy and the gravity competing with the energy, and this happens with a lot of stars. Our sun too will have the same battle in the future, and each side wins out alternately in a brief and irregular 3-year period. And this, of course, causes luminosity changes. The drama and perhaps the consequence to all this is that at only 1/500th the sun's age, it's about 8.5 million years old, it's really short in cosmic standards, it will soon meet its fate. How soon? Well, astronomers are not exactly certain. Most books figures have been narrowed down to anywhere from 1,000 to 100,000 years, so it's very difficult to predict, much like earthquakes. And who knows that over 600 light years away from our stellar system, our sun's family, it may have already exploded. But we'll get to that shortly. Next, please. Orion, Betelgeuse, well, where did it get its name? There are several sources I have here. The Random House Webster's College Dictionary says that the name came from the French language, which in turn was derived from Arabic and means shoulder of the giant, which is quite logical there. Webster's New World College Dictionary, the second edition, not the first, states the house of the twins, which I've seen quite regularly in texts. In cyberspace, Wikipedia claims hand of the central one. And according to Arabic scholar and Buffalo amateur astronomer, the late George A. Davis Jr., he found that the name to be very old indeed, dating back as far back as the Sumerians. Orion was then depicted as a sheep. Actually, I don't see a sheep there. Appropriately, the star was given the term armpit of the sheep, or better still, armpit of the white-belted sheep. Well, I'm assuming the white belt meaning the 3 stars, Alnilam, Alnitak, and Mintaka in Orion's belt. Now, in an astrophysical sense, well, here's the juicy news. Betelgeuse is truly enormous, and I was really fascinated while reading this. It is classified as a Type M supergiant. It is 1,000 times larger than our sun, and at least 50,000 times more luminous than Sol. Most of its radiation is in the infrared. Next, please. This is a diagram I drew of a building, a 10-story building. It's probably more like 11 or 12 stories. But you could just imagine Betelgeuse as large as the building. The building would fit in Betelgeuse, and planet Earth would be the size of the period at the end of a sentence in your classical novel or newspaper, just to give you a rough idea. Next, please. Now, if you take this ratio and shrink it even further, the sun is still the same size, and of course, Betelgeuse is that monster to the right. So you can see that it does go to at least 11 astronomical units, but it has such a tenuous atmosphere that it's really very hard to make, to see the surface like the sun, the photosphere of Betelgeuse, because it's a very puffed out supergiant. Now, okay, we'll go to the next slide. It may have been more massive while spending its life burning hydrogen on the main sequence part of the diagram. And how do you turn this? Right there on the main sequence where Betelgeuse, we think, started off, and of course it meandered into the supergiant phase. Our sun will be in this section here. And it depleted a substantial part of its mass in a very strong stellar wind. This was the early stage of the star. Just out of trivia, out of all the stars in our galaxy, only about 1% have main sequence masses that are greater than 30 times that of our sun. So you can see that these giants are incredibly rare indeed. And this is where we think that Betelgeuse has started out. But there is still an unshakable mystery regarding these stellar behemoths. First of all, the question is, how can they shed a sun's mass of material in a time span of only 10,000 years? That's really short. They do lead short, complicated, and violent lifespans. Quickly, they burn their hydrogen fuel and begin switching to helium, carbon, and other heavier elements. So Betelgeuse is right here. This is our sun here taking its path, and Betelgeuse will take this path here and become a supernova, and either going into a black hole or a neutron star. What happens there is that in terms of Betelgeuse, a series of partial collapses occurs, refuelings, and then restarts ensues. Next, please. Since 1993, astronomers have noticed that the star has shrunk by more than 15%. That's from 11.2 astronomical units down to 9.6 astronomical units. The question is this the sign of a long-term oscillation, or is the star beginning its initial death knells? We need to take into account that the star has a lumpy profile caused by huge roiling convection currents akin to the boiling bubbles you see in a boiling cup of water. Temperature variations in these red supergiants will cause undulating surface features. It won't be a smooth sphere like we see in the sun. It's going to be more like a clump of clay. As the star rotates in its almost 18-year period, its uneven surface appears to alter in size. Next one, please. Due to the large amount of dust clouds and gas that enshrouds the star, its actual or precise girth has been difficult to determine. That's another problem facing astronomers. And what may be happening is that a narrow part of the star may be coming into view from our perspective on Earth. So as it rotates, a narrower part is actually coming into view, and a thicker, lumpier portion is rotating away from us. Another possibility is that scientists are not measuring the star's tenuous surface, but indeed a layer of dense molecular gas just above it. And roughly in this image, this is not Betelgeuse, but this is the gas that they're measuring here. So it's very difficult to see the star. The Hubble Space Telescope snapped some visible light images showing what appeared to be an unresolved disk with star spots similar to our sunspots. The disk was only 1/20th of an arc second across, but still that was pretty good. In the images, there was a shell of potassium gas that was emanating from the star itself, and the distance of this shell was 300 times the Sun-Pluto distance, so that's really quite far. Whatever mechanism is responsible for the enormous mass loss still eludes astronomers. But according to a theory, colossal bubbles are a key for pushing material out of the star's atmosphere into the interstellar medium. So these bubbles are actually forcing the material out with great pressure and pushing all this material into the interstellar medium, which is why it's so huge. So that's why could be as much as 300 times the Sun-Pluto distance. A group of international team of astronomers from the Max Planck Institute for Radio Astronomy in Bonn, Germany, obtained the best available images of Betelgeuse yet. I don't know if there have been any up-to-date ones as far, but I think this was back in 2005. I'm not sure of the date. They used the European Southern Observatory's very large telescopic interferometer in the grand skies of Chile. Near-infrared wavelengths were used. Interferometry was the method, and they used three 1.8 meter telescopes were combined to yield the resolving power of a 48 meter telescope. So in order to see something that small, you need a very large scope. What they saw were huge bubbles pushing material out of the star's atmosphere and into space. A science package called AMBER, which is an acronym, was able to spatially resolve these movements in the atmosphere of the star other than the sun. So that was a first in astronomy. The gas can be seen moving in different areas over the star's atmosphere or photosphere right around the entire girth. Next, please. Okay, we have, let me see here. Well, this was the method that was the best image of Betelgeuse. Now you could see the gas coming out. This part here, this blue here is the gas. And I would tend to think that this is the tenuous outer part of the photosphere here. As you get closer in, it gets denser and denser. So you could see that Betelgeuse is not exactly a round sphere. It's sort of an oblong, H-shaped object. According to observations, the gas was seen moving violently up and down and not spilling out in a rather quiet, orderly way. And the material, it was flung out in gigantic arcs or loops. So I guess these are the loops here and right here. And of course, the resolution is pretty good considering what they're trying to take a picture of. The gravitational pull from such a large star, in theory, should keep the material from escaping. But instead, we're seeing a great deal of mass loss in this picture here. The origin of the bubbles is not entirely clear, but Amber has shed new light regarding how red, aged stars begin to lose mass as they start to die off. Charles Townes, or Townies, of the University of California in Berkeley, invented the laser, and he shared the Nobel Prize in 1964. His quote, and I quote him, "The star is unstable and collapse is very close. It may shrink substantially and blow off material," which is what we think is happening. One of the challenges facing astronomers with these large bloated supergiants, there's not very many of them in our galaxy, by the way, a very few lab samples are used to study from this part of our galaxy, and not many are visible due to the distance and the interstellar medium. As far as luminosity changes go, Betelgeuse carries 2 cycles. I mentioned earlier 3 cycles. So there's a question mark how many different cycles the star has. One seems to begin every year, and the other every 6 years. One idea was put forth regarding the 2 cycles, which I'm suspect to that. It is the prospect of having smaller mass planets orbiting the star. But I think planets would be very microscopic when you saw the size of the sun earlier. And if you try to put a planet even close in terms of size to the sun, it would be extremely small, almost like a bacterium compared to the star itself. The problem with this notion is that the star is only 8.5 million years old. Now, unless we are looking at a capture scenario, which is a huge star bringing in a rogue planet from another stellar system, could planets form in such a short time span? Could a planet survive the raging gas outflows, stellar winds belched out from the star? I would tend to think that the orbiting planet concept fails to hold water, unless otherwise better proven. And for us amateur astronomers, well, for us curious observers, next please. Oh, okay, that's the slide that was missing. Just to show you the size of Betelgeuse in relation to our solar system. Here is Neptune, and Mars, the orbit of Mars. So it'll just skim the orbit of Jupiter, and that's basically what it will look like. It's an artist's conception. It's a bubbling, roiling, frothing gas ball of heavier elements. And the gas flows are, of course, being quite enormous. Our sun, by the way, is not doing any of that, or we wouldn't be here, I don't think. Pardon? What we as curious observers are anticipating is the supernova forecast for this dying star. Now, don't worry, it has nothing to do with the December 21st, 2012 doomsday scenario. It has nothing related to this. So just to keep you, you can go to sleep tonight. Let's assume that Betelgeuse has had enough of life and decides to blow her top. At 600 light years from our stellar system, scientists are betting that the Earth will be spared. A supernova event would need to be within 50 light years for major consequences to occur as far as the biology and the ecosystem of our Earth is concerned. The question of gene mutations in living organisms remains to be seen. However, a neutrino flux coming from a supernova, usually astronomers, when they see a star exploding, the neutrino flux is a warning sign that tells astronomers something has blown, and then the optical part comes in a little while later. The neutrino flux brought about from an exploding star as close as 1,000 light years may cause an increase in cancer rates, but that's just theory. But don't mark my word on that. We simply don't know for sure. Next one. Now, for observers like us, there will be a visual treat. Supernova to generate the brightness of the full moon. That's what it will do, but the light will be concentrated into a small point. Eye protection will be required, similar to that looking at the sun, because it will be visible during daylight hours. And if you look at night, stark halogen-like shadows will dance eerily on the ground. The skies will take on a bluish cast like that during the full moon. Next, please. And that's the supernova from a Mars landscape, and that's about how bright it would be at night. So, of course, during the daytime, you would see it quite visibly. And I would doubt you could look at it through binoculars because you would need some eye protection. It will be quite bright. Next, please. So, who will be next? Eta Carinae for those living in the southern hemisphere, and for those in the north, Betelgeuse, the red supergiant, or perhaps a surprise. As you all know, we are well overdue for a naked eye supernova in our galaxy, or at least in this part of our galaxy. So when Betelgeuse finally blows and slowly fades away, next please, in the frigid winter night, what will we see? Well, let me see, a hunter with a dislocated shoulder, or an entirely new constellation in the northern hemisphere. Do we have the blowing? There we go. I looked at it, and we were brainstorming, Chris, myself, and April, and I figured, well, first of all, my contribution is that we would see a giraffe, although we do have a giraffe in the night sky, so that's competing. Chris had his head in the gutter. He said it was a male giraffe. And I had no comment to that. So.
Family show, folks.
Pardon? And if we go to the southern hemisphere, April's suggestion said that it wasn't an object, it wasn't an animal or any historic icon. It was simply the French number 7. So what do you make of it? And I'll let you be the judge. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Richard. I understand Jupiter is far enough away, so when it blows, it's going to give us a fine show. But then it is only 18 light years away. So order your neutron flux alarms and your lead underwear now. In the meantime, please welcome Al Scott, who's going to give us the really big science news.
Thanks, Attila. So, in news today, I've got 3 items for you. I'll be relatively quick since it's getting late. This is an interesting article on the Spitzer Infrared Space Telescope, which is entering its warm-up phase of operations now that it's lost a lot of its cryogens. This is a paper on a star that's been a star system HD 172555, which is still in the early stages of planet forming. There's a disk around it, and they actually took a spectrum of the disk in the infrared. And what this is a spectrum of the infrared. The top white shows the actual spectrum, and the astronomers have looked at this spectrum and broke it down into its component parts, and it tells a story of the collision of 2 large planetesimals in orbit around this star. Now, astronomers suspect that as stellar systems are formed, there's gas and dust, and it coagulates into planets, and these planets will then eventually collide into each other and coalesce into larger and larger bodies. Well, here we've actually taken a spectrum of this disk, and what they see is there's rubble of a 200K black body, so cool rubble in orbit around this star. And then what we also see is vaporized rock. Silicon monoxide gas is spread out around the orbit. There's also tektite spectrum, which is melted and flash refrozen rock, which we see in meteorites in our own solar system, because we know that these sort of processes went on in our own solar system. In fact, we think that the Earth's moon was formed in a collision between a Mars-sized planetesimal and the early Earth back about 4 billion years ago. We also see obsidian in the spectrum. So by adding up all these different components, the rubble, the rock, vapor, the tektite, and the obsidian, you actually match the spectrum. So this actually is a really kind of a neat discovery, that we know that this has happened relatively recently, and the rubble and the gas is still out there. It hasn't recoalesced, and a similar type of event actually in our solar system probably stripped Mercury of its crust early in the formation of our solar system. Second story is an interesting one on triggered star formation. And this is a composite image combining data from the Chandra X-ray Observatory and the Spitzer Space Telescope. And we're looking at the star-forming cloud in Cepheus, Cepheus b. It's a molecular hydrogen gas cloud about 2,400 light years from Earth. And so there's cool interstellar gas and dust, and stars are being formed in this cloud. And the bright stars at the top are the older ones, and they're blowing away the nebula, blowing away the nebulosity. And what they've determined is by looking at, they actually discover the small stars looking at the X-rays, because the young stars emit a lot of X-rays. So they detect them with the X-ray telescope. The Spitzer telescope is an infrared telescope, and it detects the cool dust disk around the stars. And we know that the dust disk doesn't last very long until it disappears and starts forming planets. And then the dust disk becomes invisible in older star systems, tens of millions of years. And so what they've done is they've been able to age the various star systems in this area, and they find that the outer ones are in the outer layer. You see the dotted line. Older star systems are in the outer layer. Intermediate layer has slightly younger systems, and then the inner layer has the youngest systems. And the theory is that basically, let me see, the Spitzer data showed that the young stars have protoplanetary disks around them. And these data test a model of how the stars form. So the new study suggests that star formation is mainly triggered by radiation from one bright massive star, HD 217086, pictured there, outside of the molecular cloud. So this star, the radiation is actually forming a shock wave in the cloud and causing these proplyds to collapse and form stars and systems. And the shock wave moves through the cloud. Otherwise, the material isn't quite dense enough to collapse, but the shock wave actually starts the collapse, which forms the new systems. So this is actually really good evidence of how young star systems are formed. There are other ways that star systems are formed. Scientists think that our star system formed from a shock wave from a supernova, because we've seen in the meteorites, in the dust grains from pre-solar nebula, we've seen heavy elements that are made in supernova explosions have been embedded in these grains, so we know that there was a supernova nearby when our solar system was forming. So these shock waves are what seem to collapse these clouds. There are other methods of star formation that people have posited. Some of them are less violent than that. But the radiation-driven implosion model is also thought to be responsible for formation of stars and other nebula that people have been observing. There's also the possibility that just stars could just form by collapse from cool gas clouds. If they get cool enough, they can get dense enough that gravity will overcome the internal pressure of the cloud. But astronomers aren't sure whether that actually happens. And finally, this one actually ties in a little bit with the last one, and it's a really interesting thing that's come out in the last couple of years. These two photographs are made by combining data from NASA's Galaxy Evolution Explorer spacecraft, an ultraviolet telescope, and the Cerro Tololo Inter-American Observatory in Chile. And these are color-coded so that the far ultraviolet is dark blue and the near ultraviolet is light blue. And let's see. Optical images are also colored red and yellow. to make a full color image. So it's a little bit of false color here. And then there's there's H alpha emission also, which is colored red in these pictures. So galaxies that are rich in O stars are going to show up as white or pink, and the areas dominated by B-type stars are going to be bluish in these types of images. And what they've found from this study basically is that galaxies form with different ratios of O to B stars. And that is something that astronomers until recently didn't think actually happened. There's been an interesting theory, and I know Richard showed a nice main sequence plot in his graph. The ratio, the number of stars formed out of a collapsing molecular cloud is always thought to be constant. You have a few big stars and a lot of littler stars, and it's called the initial mass function. And it's a theory that's been around for a long time, and it makes a lot of predictions easy because it's easy to see O and B stars in distant galaxies. And when astronomers want to guess the mass of them, they look at nearby clusters, for example, and they measure the ratio of bright stars to dim stars. But in distant galaxies, you can't see the dim stars. So you have to predict how many dim stars there are out there. And it was a nice, convenient thing to assume that this initial mass function was a universal thing, that the ratio of big stars to little stars was the same everywhere. And because we didn't know any better, that's what we did. But now we've actually discovered that in some smaller galaxies with less densities of gas and dust, there's actually a different ratio of big stars to small stars. Some of them are actually galaxies with less dense gas clouds form a lot more small stars for every big star. So this actually is really interesting stuff, and it's going to adjust our thinking on how heavy some of these galaxies are. So breaking news, it's kind of neat stuff, and it really does upset some of the old cherished beliefs. So that brings me to the end of the 10-minute astronomy. One other thing I want to mention before I go, I don't have a slide for it, but there's a paper that recently came out on galactic cosmic rays, and because we're experiencing right now a solar minimum that's the lowest, deepest solar minimum in over 100 years, the sun has this bubble called the heliosheath, which is the magnetic bubble that keeps out the interstellar medium, and it deflects cosmic rays. Well, right now, our inner solar system is experiencing 20% higher flux of cosmic rays than have ever been recorded before because of this deep solar minimum. Basically, the magnetic bubble that the sun is putting out is collapsing inwards. And so these galactic rays are getting into the inner solar system. And this actually could have interesting effects if we send people out into space beyond the Earth's magnetic field. They have to actually shield themselves a little bit more from this, or else they're going to get cancer. So, interesting stuff. Thank you.
There's a very practical implication of the increased cosmic ray flux. There's at least one theory that says that some of those cosmic rays form nuclei in the Earth's atmosphere to cause the formation of clouds. So we may in fact be seeing cloudier weather. So if big science can find a way to turn off the cosmic rays, it would be a good thing, because I've had enough clouds for a while. Right. All that remains is for us to explain what good fun we're going to have scheduled within the next month. First of all, tonight, please share a carbohydrates caffeine with your hosts Anne and Art Fraser. This is your chance to talk to our speakers and tell them what you like about their show. Also, if you'd like to continue the conversation past 11 p.m. over alcohol and real food, or perhaps if you'd just like to sit down, come join us at Kelsey's. On the 9th, this is Mike Moghadam's Star Party at the Carpel Library with October 10th and 16th rain dates. So watch the website for announcements as to whether or not the party is go. On the same night, on the 9th, for those people who can't get out to Carp, the museum here will have an observing session with the Helen Hoyer Slack telescope, which is a flight dome outside. And next Saturday, Rolf and Linda are having a special party, and they're here to tell us about it. Rolf? Yes, this is Rolf's third appearance in the program tonight.
Okay, so in case you were wondering, we'll have our annual picnic on next Saturday, which of course is the rain date for the CARP event, so we hope that that's clear on Friday and you can make it to the picnic. There's lots of parking, and just bring your own food and telescopes and whatever you want. Next slide. So when you come in just after the wagon wheel, turn right, and that takes you up the hill. There's a road that goes up the hill. And is there another slide? Well, that's roughly where we are, about 15 minutes past the Scotiabank Place. And so we hope to see you there. That's at 3 o'clock next Saturday, and the annual picnic.
Thank you, Rolf. I've been to several picnics at Rolf and Linda's, and I can confirm they are excellent hosts. And the picnic is a lot of fun, even if it's cloudy, and it's excellent, it's clear. Also on the 30th, Eric Kajula has called for a star party at his kid's school.
Anyone with a telescope? I don't have one. We're having a kids, students dance at my son's school, and we'd like to do something different this year and introduce 6 to 12-year-olds to astronomy. I'm going to be putting a little slideshow together in the auditorium at the school, and then we'll invite the students to go outside and see some cool stuff. But I need a volunteer with a telescope. Anyone who'd like to join me, I can pick you up and drop you back off wherever you live, and so on. So if you can, if someone would like to, I'd really appreciate it.
I would suggest that you ask for 3 telescopes.
I think, yeah, 3 would be good.
Right. Come see Eric if you'd like to help out.
Or email, I'm on the list.
Okay. Also, by the way, just a notice.
Thank you.
To be announced at the dinner meeting on the 13th. I'll be looking at all the observations done this year and selecting an Observer of the Year award. So if you have observing logs or other observing reports, find some way to show them to me before November the 1st, and I'll select the winner. I'm also going to be including, because apparently I've been told that the exact process for choosing this award is entirely to my whim, I've decided to include all of the observations that have been presented here at the podium by observers since the last December meeting. So you don't have to represent anything that you've already presented, but if you'd like to remind me about your terrific picture of the armpit of Orion, feel free to send it to me again. Just be clear that you're emailing me an observation for the award rather than for inclusion in the November meeting. Otherwise I might be confused and not sure what, or put it the wrong way.